What up, everybody? Welcome into the College Chaos Podcast. I'm Garrett Ross alongside my man Jack Mackenzie and Emery Winter over there holding us down, making sure we look and sound almost as good as them LSU Tigers did the other night.
Oh, God, not this again.
I tried to get the boys to change the intro to neck. They shot me down, but you know.
That's not happening.
You know, it's just, it is what it is. But another natty. Feels good. Feels good.
I bet it does.
Yeah, I
Even
know.
when you have to watch Kim Mulkey celebrate it.
Well, look, I'm not big on that, but hey, you know, a ring's a ring, and it just is what it is. It's good vibes on the bayou. But right now, we are going to talk.
Speaking of a ring's a ring.
A ring's a ring, yeah. So we're going to talk about the defending Big 12 football champions, the K-State Wildcats. Emery and I had an opportunity to go up to Jerry World last year and watch them do what really no team other than Georgia was able to do and take care of TCU. And to do that, we are going to be joined by Jeff Burkhart, the host of the College and Kimbell Podcast. Jeff, man, what's up? How are you doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Appreciate y'all having me on here. Always excited to talk ball, especially as we trudge through the summer months. These drag on forever. June especially. But, man, once you get to July, you could start to smell it a little bit. And, you know, you got media days coming up here. And then before you know it, fall camp's around and season's here. So I'm excited to talk ball.
Yeah, so K-State's really intriguing, and I think when you can't really talk about the Wildcats this season without addressing the elephant in the room, and that's Deuce Vaughn taking his exit and being drafted by the Cowboys. I know that was a cool moment for the family with his dad being able to announce it as he works with the organization. But as far as the rushing attack goes this year, you bring in Treshaun Ward, who I'm really excited to watch, the transfer from Florida State. You also have DJ Giddens back. So what are the expectations for that rushing attack, and how do you see what are some of the similarities and differences that people can expect this year?
Expectations are still very high. A lot of people just anticipating plug and play with Treshaun Ward. And if you look at his career numbers at Florida State, there's justification there, no doubt about that. He's rushed for over 1,200 yards in his time in Tallahassee, averaged better than 6.6 per carry, and not an insignificant amount of carries, almost 200 lifetime. So he's an explosive guy. An interview I did hear him say he compares himself more to a Le'Veon Bell type, and I don't really associate Le'Veon Bell with the explosive hit a home run, a threat to hit a home run anytime he touches the ball type, much more of a patient runner. So we'll see on that front. I still think he's definitely going to be more of the lightning to the compliment to DJ Giddens there. Giddens was kind of the closer, if you will, in my mind for last year. You have to deal with Deuce Vaughn for 3 quarters, and you saw the offensive coaches say, okay, 4th quarter, now we got 6'2", 220 coming downhill at you, and you didn't want to take those shots. Baylor fans very much aware of that from a couple years ago with Tristan Ebner and Abram Smith. Those guys just beating you up down after down for 4 quarters, and you didn't want to deal with that smoke once you got to the 4th quarter. So I still think this is going to be a very dynamic rushing attack. I caution those K-State fans out there that just expect Treshaun Ward to come in and give you the same level of production that, just 1,500 yards that Deuce Vaughn gave you last season. He was a very special runner, so I think he's going to be hard to replace. So I think you're going to see a much more equitable split on the carries between those two. Very excited to see what Colin does with these two pieces going into this season, though.
Yeah, Jeff, another question, at least I have on the offensive side. I'm wondering who's going to step up at wide receiver. I mean, Malik Knowles is gone, right, I believe. So
sure.
Who's going to step up? Who's going to be that guy that allows Will Howard to rack up the stats to keep that a truly dual threat offense?
Yeah, Malik had a great year last year, career highs in receptions and yards, and really burst onto the scene in a way that a lot of K-State fans would hope that he would going into that final year of his career. They're looking to Keegan Johnson to be the guy who steps up. He was an Iowa transfer, had 18 catches, 352 yards, a couple of touchdowns as a freshman, almost 20 yards per catch there. So a guy who's a threat to take the top off for sure. Size-wise, doesn't really stack up in the same way. He's only 6 foot and 193 pounds. So doesn't necessarily give you that that same ability and that same confidence level that you had when you could just throw it up to Malik and hope that he could go out there and high point it, being at about 6'3". So he had the size. Keegan Johnson doesn't necessarily have that element to his game. But at the end of the day, I still feel like K-State got one of the most highly sought after transfers on the market this past season. He was the 19th rated athlete on On3. So got him coming in there. You'll also have Jaden Jackson. He was a transfer from Ole Miss. Didn't play a lot for K-State last season. He was able to preserve his red shirt. So he's going to be another guy looking to step in and fill that void. You had another big hit too when you lose Cade Warner, a guy who had 40+ catches last year. So Jaden Jackson is another one to look at. RJ Garcia, a sophomore, 6 foot, 176 pounds, and that's dripping wet. He's a very lean guy, so not necessarily going to be a very physical receiver. Only had 7 catches last year. Did have the big 25-yard touchdown catch in that Big 12 championship game that y'all talked about against TCU. So it's going to be a committee approach after Keegan Johnson. You've got Sterling Lockett, Tyson Struber. Trey Spivey was a very highly sought after incoming freshman. So K-State beat out Oklahoma State, Arizona State, Wisconsin to get him. He was the number 78 wide receiver per 247. So we'll see. I think Keegan Johnson is going to absolutely be able to fill in and give you the same type of production that you had with Malik Knowles. But after that, it's going to be a lot of unknown. I think there's a lot of apprehension there, at least on my side. You do retain Phillip Brooks, but still there's definitely some question marks at that position for Kansas State.
Well, as the offense goes, I mean, everything's going to rely on really returning all of your offensive linemen, but Will Howard. And I don't think anybody was really expecting the type of season he had last year. How do you see his progression this year? And as far as like the room as a whole, like I know you got young guys like Avery Johnson. I'm really excited to see what he can do in the future. But where does Will Howard stand amongst the Big 12 ranks with quarterbacks in your eyes? And what kind of steps can we see him take this season?
Honestly, I think Will Howard at this point in his career just pick up where you left off. He made that really monumental jump last season. We saw the yards per attempt go up from 6.8 to 8.2. Did a great job pushing the ball down the field with some consistency. So if he just can really maintain that same level of production, I think that would be massive for Kansas State. I think completion percentage, that's one area where he did lack a little bit. He was below 60%, now just barely last year. So I think you'd like to see that tick up and get into the mid to upper 60s going into this season. But as far as where he ranks amongst the Big 12 quarterbacks, I think you have every reason to believe that he is one of the top 2 to 3. I know everybody and their brother is really high on Jalen Daniels, despite the fact that Will Howard put up better numbers and arguably against better competition last season. So kind of a surprise to see Will Howard not getting, when you're starting to look at your preseason mags and everything, starting to see who's going to be pegged as first team or second team, and a lot of love for Quinn Ewers, justifiably so. But I think Will Howard's probably the one best positioned to be that first team all Big 12 quarterback this season. Quinn Ewers has got a lot on his plate. You don't have the convenience now of just being able to hand the ball off to Bijan or Roshan and two monsters at running back anymore. So it's going to be all on him this season. And I think with Jalen at KU, I think there's a little bit of, okay, we've had a year to see now what KU really looks like. And again, the way that they kind of fizzled out at the end of last season too, I think there's an element of, can KU actually come in and reproduce this now that we kind of know what this passing attack is going to look like as far as Andy Kolanecki's offense goes. So I think Will Howard, again, is best positioned to be the first team all Big 12 quarterback. Again, it's just a matter of, can some of those unknowns at wide receiver step up and give you the same level of production that you had last year with Malik and Cade Warner? That's the big question in my mind. But I still, if I gun to the head today, if you were to ask me to put his name on a ballot, I would say he's first team all Big 12 in my mind heading into this season.
Yeah, I think, honestly, I feel like there's a lot of certainty and security there just because of the way he produced last year. Kind of playing off of that, I don't see much certainty or security in the defense. I only see 4 returning starters. They're peppered throughout, so you've got guys at the different levels. But Are there many defensive concerns up in Manhattan, and how do you see that playing out?
So the way that things have kind of shaken out in the secondary, K-State's really going to be looking at 5 new faces full time. You had VJ Payne come on the scene towards the end of last season after K-State really had sustained a bunch of injuries. You lose Kobe Savage during the Baylor game. You lost Sincere Mason. So you had to throw a true freshman into the fire. And he absolutely stepped up to the task, and he had 10 tackles in the Sugar Bowl against Alabama. I think VJ Payne, and by all accounts, coaches are saying he is just a sponge, and he is going to be able to really be able to point guys in the right direction. So you'll have some presence there, some experience there, I should say, as far as one of those safety positions goes. The big question, Kobe Savage, can he return to form after his season-ending injury against Baylor? He was very highly thought of. He was second team All Big 12 last year, and that was with him missing more or less 4 conference games. So that shows you the level of production that they had. So how quickly can he rebound from his injury is going to be a big question. Jacob Parrish played as a true freshman, defensive back out of Olathe North, here just right down the road from Manhattan. I think he's poised to have another breakout year. They're going to throw a lot of bodies, though, at the rest of those secondary positions, and they've been pretty good, I will say, at plugging and playing. They lost 3 safeties heading into last year when they lost Russ Yeast to the draft, lost Jerron McPherson, lost Reggie Stubblefield. They plugged in the aforementioned Kobe Savage, plugged in Sincere Mason, plugged in Josh Hayes, and Josh Hayes ended up getting drafted. And again, you had an All Big 12 type performer in Kobe Savage. So I don't have as much concern on that side of the ball. Defensive coordinator Joe Klanderman, the safety position is the group that he works with directly. So I think K-State will be pretty safe on that front. This will also be the 3rd year in this 3-3-5 stack. And I think there's a fair amount of understanding just from the returning players that will be coming back in terms of roles and responsibility. So I still feel pretty confident about this group. It's still tough to say, are you going to be able to just plug in for a guy like Julius Brents, who ends up going in the 2nd round? Josh Hayes, again, the aforementioned Hayes, he wasn't even honorable mention Big 12, but he ended up getting drafted in the 6th round. Can you fill in those holes and get the same level of production? That's the big question in my mind. Like I said, though, I have a fair amount of confidence in Klanderman's group. He's done this before, and I have no reason to believe that he can't do it again.
We're talking with Jeff Burkhart, the host of the College and Kimbell Podcast. And Jeff, I know people in Waco are really excited as far as the schedule and how it benefits Baylor this year with most of their big games coming at home. And that's something they didn't have last year. And K-State's kind of the opposite, man. I was looking at your schedule, and most of your big games are on the road, including back-to-backs at Oklahoma State and at Texas Tech. You also go to Texas and Kansas, but you don't play Oklahoma. What is the vibe around the schedule up in Manhattan, and how do you see this shaking out or maybe negatively impacting the Wildcats?
Man, the front half is just a landmine. Even in the non-con, because you draw a 9-3 Southeast Missouri State team that won the Ohio Valley last year, went to the FCS playoffs. So you have a tough FCS squad coming in week 1. You have Troy, best season, coming off the best season in program history, going 12-2, winners of the Sun Belt Conference. And then you have to go play at Mizzou and playing at an SEC team. I mean, that's one of those where, the guys will be up for it. And hopefully some of those question marks that you have, you're able to work through in weeks 1 and 2, but those aren't gimmies. Those aren't layups that you have in the first couple of weeks. So you need to find a way to start the season off 2-0 and climb into to that point is also just really struggled for some reason against these G5 teams. K-State stubbing its toe last year at home against Tulane. A couple of years ago in the COVID season, they gagged a double-digit lead against Arkansas State. So that they have to find a way to get that Troy game right out the gate, because I think that's going to set up nicely. If you can get that game against Mizzou is, per a lot of the metrics that I've looked at, ESPN's FPI has it as more or less a coin flip game. I'm not super high on Mizzou this year, even though they do have a lot of starters coming back. I believe they have 15 total coming back. I think that's a game Kansas State can absolutely get, and then they can set themselves up to potentially go 1-2 in that stretch where you have to open up Big 12 play at home against UCF, which has the highest projected win total if you're looking at some of the Vegas odds. So I don't feel particularly great about the front half of the schedule, but the benchmark I'm looking at, can you go 4-2 through the first half? Because if you get to the back half, you only leave the state of Kansas once after October 14th. And that's for that road game against KU. K-State's won 14 consecutive against the Jayhawks. I think you'll be in a good position. Again, if you find a way to go 4-2 through that first half of the season, you'll be in a great spot. Even if you drop that game against Mizzou, but you get 2 out of your first 3 in Big 12 play, I would feel great about K-State having an opportunity to get it to Arlington and defend its Big 12 crown, because getting Houston at home, getting TCU at home, Baylor at home, those are games, if you had to play those on the road, I'd be a little iffy about, but I feel pretty confident about all of them coming to Manhattan. Feel good about Iowa State having to come to Manhattan. The Texas game in Austin, that's one of those where if you find a way to upset UT, awesome. If you don't, I think you might have a shot to get a rematch against them in the Big 12 championship game. And K-State has lost 6 straight against the Horns anyway, so I don't feel great about that one as it is. But all in all, just find a way to navigate that first half. That's the big question in my mind. Can you make it through there without stubbing your toe too many times and starting 3-3 or 2-4, you know?
Yeah, Jeff, I definitely hope Kansas State finds a way to beat Texas at least once in the coming season. Definitely not biased here, but I'd be a bit remiss. There's plenty of reason for confidence out of MHK, but I've got to ask, there are expectations this year. And here in Waco, we saw Baylor handle those terribly over the course of last year. So in a rather similar spot, a program that's more grinded out, that wasn't necessarily expected to be there last year, they came away with the crown. Are the expectations affecting the team, or do you foresee them affecting the team in any way?
I really don't. This team has done an immensely good job at responding. You think about just last year when they stubbed their toe against Tulane, and then you have to go on the road to face a top 10 Oklahoma, at that point in time, a top 10 Oklahoma team in Norman. Everybody in Manhattan was selling their stock. We all thought, oh, this was going to be a dark horse year, and then you spit the bit against Tulane, and everybody's just questioning whether or not this would even be a bowl team. And then they have that resounding victory against Oklahoma, and then same thing, they bounce back. They had a tough loss later on in the season against TCU. They come back and blow out Oklahoma State. This team, I think, mentally, the toughness is absolutely there. And you think about it too, it's hard to believe this is going to be year 5 for Chris Kleiman and company. The culture is very firmly established and entrenched in MHK. There's this really symbiotic trust that exists between player and coach. This is not the taskmaster approach that Bill Snyder had. I think Coach Kleiman is very much hands-off. Trust is very player-friendly program, and he says it countless times. You'll hear him throughout media availability during the course of the season. He always tells his players, this is your team, and they absolutely believe that. They take it to heart, and the big theme that you've heard coming out of Manhattan this season from guys like Will Howard and the leaders, raise the bar. You made it to the summit last season by beating TCU, winning the Big 12 championship game, getting to a New Year's Six bowl, getting the opportunity to face the preeminent program in college football in Alabama. You made it to that level. Don't fall off a cliff. And the other thing too, historically, from Kansas State's perspective, they've seen this happen where Bill Snyder's first Big 12 championship in 2003, they popped at what was that point the number 1 team in Oklahoma in the Big 12 title game. The next season in 2004, you have Darren Sproles coming back. A lot of people had very high expectations about K-State getting back to the Big 12 title game, and they miss a bowl the next 2 seasons, and then Bill Snyder retires. And kind of this, to a lesser degree, that more or less happened after Bill Snyder's second title, where K-State just kind of slowly started to taper off to 7-5, 6-6, 7-5, and they were just kind of this middling program. I think historically that's been seen, and this team, this culture, they want to avoid that and prevent that from happening. And again, players absolutely know that this is their program, and they take an immense amount of pride in that and putting it on the line as far as going out week to week and competing. Coaches believe it too, and they've really done a great job of propelling this program into the 21st century, putting a lot more effort and time into recruiting, trying to bring in high-level classes and guys that are capable of keeping this program at a very relevant high level. They bring in the 34th ranked recruiting class this past cycle. A lot of big gets in there for Kansas State. So I think culture is very much established. And again, this program, I think, is poised and in a great position to maintain the standard that they have set for themselves, which is we expect to be in Arlington. Now, as I said, you got a lot of landmines on that schedule. Can you navigate that? Can you bounce back if you do stub your toe? That's the big question. I think, though, they've shown me that they can answer those questions. And I think this group is very much poised to defend its Big 12 title this season.
Yeah, Jeff, the culture and the mental toughness is actually something that's noted through the Big 12, not just up there in Kansas. Sure. In fact, in the Athlon preview magazine for the Big 12, they had an opposing Big 12 assistant coach anonymously say they're more talented than all but one or two teams probably, and they're mentally tougher than those teams. So it's out there and it's known. But Garrett, you had another one, right?
Yeah, Jeff, I want to talk, kind of going with what you were saying with recruiting and as well as the recent success that you've had that K-State's had against Kansas. With Lance Leipold up there, have you seen an uptick in the energy with the Sunflower Showdown? And what are those recruiting battles like with the Jayhawks these days?
There was a lot more anxiety on the Kansas State fan side. You might not get that answer out of every K-State fan going into the Sunflower Showdown last year, but it was much more palpable because KU had shown itself to be much more formidable than it's been at any point over the last almost 20 years when you think about it. So that game in Manhattan had a lot more juice than it had in recent memory. And I think fans really did revel in beating the Jayhawks the way that they did, getting that 20-point victory, beating them up on special teams and doing everything that they did en route to that 47-27 win. I still think from a recruiting standpoint, K-State has the edge just by virtue of the fact that Kleiman's been around a little bit longer, and K-State has that proven carrot of success out there. This team having gone to bowls in 3 out of the last 4 seasons. You have a little bit more to sell in that respect. Now, KU rather is selling this very sexy, high-paced offense that Jalen Daniels is running, and they've got great pieces in there like Devin Neal as well to complement. So there's been a lot more juice here in recent memory, and K-State did have to fend off KU in some of these recruiting battles. Now, granted, last season they did pick up 6 of the top Kansas high school kids, and they got the number 1 prospect, the most coveted of all of those, in Avery Johnson, an Elite 11 quarterback. So there's definitely a sense that KU is starting to encroach on that territory that was very firmly Kansas State's. And honestly, if you were talking about a prospect in the Kansas City area, the Wichita area, you were far more concerned recently with the likes of Iowa State potentially going down there and plucking that kid out of Wichita, or Iowa or Nebraska or Oklahoma coming up north and trying to snag somebody. Now KU, I think fans do know KU is a little bit more of a legitimate threat, and that's putting a little bit more pressure on this group to continue to maintain this level of success on the field, because I think at the end of the day, that still trumps just about anything that a program can offer in terms of NIL or otherwise. I still think on-field success sells more than just about anything else. That's just my personal opinion, and I think that's why K-State does have a slight edge in some of these recruiting battles right now.
One last thing. I think everybody as a whole is really excited about the new Big 12. And like even the incoming teams, we have, athletic directors and stuff that come on 365 Sports in the afternoon, and everybody is just pumped. Like, what are your thoughts about the new Big 12? And are there any programs of the 4 that you're, I guess, most excited to see or intrigued to see going forward?
First off, as far as the new Big 12 goes, I'm all too thrilled that it seems like we have 12 institutions and athletic programs all pulling in the same direction. And I know parity isn't necessarily fun anymore in college football. We all seem too big at the national level. Everybody seems to care so much about the brands. It's all about the brands. The TV networks just care about brands. I think really there's an immense amount of parity in this conference now, and I love that. I love going, and it makes the games a little bit more stressful heading into the week, but in the same breath, like, you don't know, you're playing Iowa State, you're playing Houston, you're playing UCF. A lot of these games, point spread wise, are going to be within a touchdown. There's going to be intrigue going into pretty much every game each and every week, especially now that KU especially has gotten its act together. I love that. And I think that it's showing you coaching. It's bringing coaching acumen to the forefront. So you get to see which coaches actually do prep their guys better, do have the better system and so forth, do have the better culture and whatnot. Now, as far as which programs intrigue me most in this new look Big 12, honestly, BYU kind of just being out on an island there in the Mountain Time Zone. Now that will they be the only Mountain program in the conference for the foreseeable future? I don't know, but that's the one I think that intrigues me most, just because I think Houston, so many of the Big 12 institutions already recruit in that area, and you kind of have a general idea of what you're going to get. Texas Tech plays Houston a lot. A lot of the Big 12 schools square off against Houston in the non-con. So it's not a program that you're unfamiliar with. You also have Dana Holgerson coaching there, and he's coached, I believe it was 8 years at West Virginia. So you have some familiarity there. UCF too. That's one that intrigues me as well, but I just think BYU is just so uniquely isolated, and for cultural reasons, there's a lot of different elements at play there with BYU. But I'm interested to see how they handle this transition into the Big 12. I really do think UCF, Houston are going to be the ones poised to make the easiest jump and assimilate themselves into this new look Big 12. But I think BYU is going to be the one that it might take a little bit of time. That kind of like with West Virginia, took them a bit, took TCU a bit too. But like I said, at a macro level, I'm all too excited to go forward with this new look Big 12. You have a lot of just parity at so many different levels, and I don't think one institution has a higher recruiting ceiling than another. I think, Houston, TCU, Baylor obviously have a little bit higher ceilings than some of the other, just by virtue of where they're located. But still, it's a very intriguing conference. You're going to have competitive and compelling football games each and every Saturday. And to me, that's what makes a conference. That's what makes it unique. That's what makes it fun. And I'm glad that the two big brands that I think were just really more or less tearing this conference apart are going to be going to presumably greener pastures. Hey, if you want to go and get your teeth kicked in the SEC and have to deal, how is Oklahoma and Texas? How are those schools going to deal with going 6-6 or 7-5?
Can't wait to see
year in and year out, because I think it's going to take you a bit to get used to that. So good luck. Have fun. You had a very easy path to the college football playoff when you were in the Big 12. If you want to throw that by the wayside for a little bit more cash and presumably some better home field matchups, go right ahead. But I still think it's going to be a bit before OU and or Texas makes it to the college football playoff when they make that move to the SEC.
I couldn't agree with you more, man. Like, that's spot on. I think that's how most people feel. And I think Texas might have the little edge over Oklahoma, but they're going to have a reality check when they go over there nonetheless.
Yeah. And I am very excited to see what Alabama-Texas game early in the non-con. Very excited to see what's going to happen there. It's going to be a big litmus test. I do feel Sark, though, has UT positioned a little bit better than Venables does Oklahoma. That's just my 2 cents. But again, I just can't get past the fact that, you're going to have to play Alabama, LSU, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, and a lot of these programs are operating at peak efficiency right now. It's just going to be a tough transition in my mind. I just can't get around that fact. And like I said, I don't know how quickly people are going to pull the trigger, and the SEC just breaks so many programs' brains too. When you go 7-5 or 8-4, and so many people say that's not good enough. That's not good enough. Like, if you're just gonna, you can easily get yourself caught into that cycle of we got to get somebody new. We got to try to stay competitive. And like I said, I just think that's going to break a lot of folks' brains if they have to sit through a couple of 7-5s or a 6-6, and then an 8-4, then back to a 6-6. Like, I don't know. be careful what you wish for.
Yup. He's Jeff Burkhart at Jeff_Burkhart on Twitter. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks again for having me on. Looking forward to the season.
All right.
Us too.
Yeah, that was great. Jeff killed that. A lot of great insight there on the Wildcats and the Big 12 in general. But coming up next, we're going to take a look at some of the dark horses across the Power 5 conferences, and then we're going to get into our offensive playmakers and the Big 12 preseason poll. But that's coming up next here on the College Chaos Podcast.
Welcome back into the College Chaos Podcast here on Crystal Ball College Football. We're just kind of vibing with the track, right,
Dude,
Garrett?
Ninth Power's dope.
Yeah. When are you going to throw something down on that?
Hey, we can do it whenever.
Whenever.
Whenever. We can do it.
Okay. Can't wait to see that. It's
You might be surprised.
yeah. Speaking of surprises, let's look at some teams that might surprise us this year through the Power 5 conferences. Let's look at our picks for some dark horses, starting off with the Big 12.
So for me, I had a wide variety of options here. I think we both did. I think if you look at the new schools coming in, UCF is probably somebody you're looking at just because, I mean, Gus Malzahn's been there. He's won natties. So they're located in the pristine area for talent.
They've got that Florida talent.
They have the Florida talent.
They've generally been, as a program over the last decade or so, on the come up.
Absolutely. But the team that really stuck out to me the most, and this is probably going to sound really weird because I've taken a dump on his lawn a few times for this, Oklahoma State.
Yeah, you coming around on them?
I'm not coming around on them. And look, I want to be clear. I want to be clear with this. When I say dark horse, when we say dark horse, I'm not saying a team that's going to come up and win the championship, right? But I think a team who, based on their schedule, has an opportunity to shake things up. And
I'm going a little further in some of these conferences.
Some of them could.
For the SEC and the ACC, I don't see someone that could actually possibly make a run at a conference title game.
No.
But here in the Big 12, I think that's a prerequisite. It's such a knife fight of a conference. It's a wide open conference. I feel like a dark horse should be able to make the conference title game. And So you're going to have to explain Oklahoma State to me because I don't have them at that standard.
Okay, so obviously when you look at last year, once they lost Spencer Sanders, well, I guess it was at the bowl game. It was really kind of things fell apart throughout the year as a whole just because of injuries.
Yep.
And Spencer Sanders, I've never really been high on him. I always thought he was kind of overrated to the turnovers and everything. But at the same time, Garrett Rangel was not it. Like I think he's definitely going to be okay. But he's still got to develop. So I think they did a good job of grabbing Alan Bowman out of the transfer portal. Now, I know when you hear that name, especially in the Big 12, you're going to be like, really? I mean, he didn't really do much at Michigan. But if you go back to his freshman year, dude, at Tech, like he put up some numbers. He threw for almost 3,000 yards and 17 touchdowns as a freshman. So I think given the offense that they have, having a guy like Brendan Presley back at the receiver, I think Ollie Gordon, he was probably I loved watching Ollie Gordon in high school. He was phenomenal at the running back position. I think he could probably have a breakout season. And then you also, on the defensive side, man, you return all Big 12 freshmen and all-American freshman safety. The Kendall kid, he's really good. But as far as their schedule, right, like you have no Texas, who I think most people are considering the possibly being the Big 12 champion or playing in the championship. I don't think I've heard anybody that hasn't had Texas.
Pretty much everyone has Texas in that title game.
You also don't get Tech, who a lot of people are high on. That is actually my Big 12 championship.
We'll get to Tech in a second.
Yeah. But you get Kansas State and Oklahoma at home. Mm-hmm. And it's the final bedlam. I know you have a bad track record there. You haven't really done well against the Sooners.
I didn't realize how weak their road schedule was.
Yeah. It's pretty.
At Iowa State, at West Virginia, at UCF, at Houston.
But see, and
that's Kevin Durant cupcake.
Yeah, and here's the real caveat. Look at the final 5 weeks of the season. You play all of the incoming schools.
And Oklahoma's the only wow, that's
so when you look at that. And look, Gundy.
That's a good reason to look at Oklahoma State. You're bringing me around a little.
Gundy's got a chip on his shoulder, right? Like this is a dude I feel like it's going to be and I don't want to say make or break season. I don't think that's probably really extreme. But his standards, like he's won 17 consecutive or had 17 consecutive winning seasons. So that's really the standard up there. And the way this schedule shakes out, I could see him being a dark horse and kind of, stirring the pot a little bit in the Big 12.
Yeah. Now, I've got a different dark horse, and real quick, I want to run through something. TCU defending champs can't be a dark horse. No, sorry. Kansas State defending champs can't be a dark horse. TCU defending national runner-up can't be a dark horse. Texas Tech, I don't know if this is just an in-Texas thing, but they're not a dark horse. In the news, in the mentions, in my Twitter feed, they have too much heat on them right now to be considered a dark horse. They have too much limelight on them right now to be considered a dark horse. So they are not in my dark horses group. I had a group of 4, honestly. It was Oklahoma State, UCF, which we've already mentioned both. Yeah. Then it was Baylor, which they got to show us something first.
They have to.
We're not. Neither of us is going to go with them.
They would I think you could make an argument for them being a dark horse.
Yes, definitely. And actually, Josh Neighbors did a couple weeks ago on our air. He had them in the title game against Texas. My pick is Kansas. It would take a bit to get there. It would take some chaos, but they have the offensive talent and great scheme to go along with that talent on the offensive side to really carry them there. Jalen Daniels, obviously, phenomenal. He's going to be up there gunning for first team All Big 12 quarterback, hopefully through the year. Hopefully he's healthy.
Got to stay healthy.
Beat me to the punch. Their 4 best opponents this year are mostly at home. They only have to go to Texas. They do have to play Tech, Kansas State, and OU, but all of those are in Kansas. I'm liking that for them. The biggest question mark is the defense. They just don't have a lot of talent. Their roster is still thin. Oh, yeah. They're still not recovered from the terrible mismanagement for a decade plus. But the entire defensive secondary, so the full back 7. I'm not even talking back 4. I'm talking the back 7. Yeah. All their linebackers and back. They're all returning. I feel like they weren't great last year, but
experience. You have the experience.
So that's why I've got Kansas State as my Big 12 dark horse. Because I didn't realize how soft the Cowboys' schedule was. It's Stillwater, but I think both of those schools are the ones you got to keep an eye on. And you should also keep an eye on Baylor and UCF if you're looking at dark horses and possibly looking to make a dark horse kind of bet.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. let's go to the Big Ten. So I think there's a few different teams that you could
good old
go
Midwestern land.
The good old Western
I'm
land.
getting up there. I'm literally leaving after work today to go up to Wisconsin, which is why I'm taking Wisconsin as my dark horse in the Big Ten.
Why are you taking the Badgers?
I mean, as much as I want to take Purdue, love me and my Boilermakers. I don't know if there are many outside of Michigan, Ohio State, many like top 3 coaches in anywhere across the country that are as good as the combination of Luke Fickell, Phil Longo, the OC, and Jim Leonard, the DC.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Baylor fans are screaming for Jim Leonard when they were searching for a DC this offseason, and Packer fans.
Yes, they were.
My 2 green and gold teams. Both fan bases were like, we want Jim Leonard. The Packers didn't even fire their DC over this, like at the end of the season. The Packers fans are just so fed up with Joe Barry that they're like, give us Leonard, give us Jim Leonard. So yeah, they've got great coaches. They brought in Tanner Mordecai to be the QB. They're going to run a more wide open offense. And frankly, their schedule, they only have Ohio State. Every other game looks really winnable. Like there are too many question marks. If their offense can cause problems for teams like Iowa's defense, which is going to be top tier, it's Iowa. But that's one of the tougher games. So it just seems like it's lining up for Wisconsin for me to have 8, possibly 9 wins.
It's very, very doable, and it's funny.
And that's enough to win the Big Ten West.
Yeah,
and that's all I'm saying they'll do.
No, yeah, and mentioning that Iowa defense, I am going with Iowa as my dark horse. And this is a team that went 8-5, 5-4 last season, and had arguably the worst offense ever. And it's really crazy because you have Brian Ferentz, who had the clause put in his contract where he's got to score a certain amount of points. And to do that, right, like you need a quarterback that can actually do something. Exactly. It's really absurd. That's got to be one of the weirdest clauses that I would love to see. Like
anyway, I got you off base.
But no, Cade McNamara comes over as your quarterback from Michigan. He's put up solid numbers over there. He's been able to win some big-time games within the Big Ten, and he's familiar with all those defenses. You return your entire offensive line, which is a big deal for the Hawkeyes. But I'm kind of concerned on the defense. That's where I'm a little apprehensive. You lose your the Buckus Award-winning linebacker Jack Campbell, and also Lucas Van Ness is going to the NFL as well. But you have solid tight end play on offense, which that's kind of like an Iowa thing, right? Like you have all these badass tight ends that can make all the plays. But what's really intriguing to me is their schedule. I think their schedule is favorable because their toughest games on the road are at Penn State and at Wisconsin. Ooh. And if you look at that game last year, they beat Wisconsin. So I think if you have a better offense, the defense is what it is. The defense is always going to be good. I don't think necessarily that they can win the Big Ten or maybe even get to the Big Ten title, but I think that they would make a very good dark horse in the league.
Yeah. I'm a little nervous about running out of time here.
We're good.
We're good? Okay. Then let's go to your homeland, to your heartland.
SEC. You know you like it.
Yeah, I did earlier. Right before the show, I was like, SEC. I don't know what came over me, but anyway, who should we be expecting to in this conference? Let's be real. It's not about even making the conference title game necessarily. It's who's going to cause some chaos.
Exactly.
And here at the College Chaos Podcast, you know we love it.
Who are you taking?
Oh, I've got South Carolina. Shane Beamer, it's a tough schedule, but they're still in arguably the weaker division.
Right.
And Beamer's a coach that, I just know he's going to get guys running through a brick wall for him. They don't have a lot of returning starters, only 5 on offense, 4 on defense. But I just feel like they could pop up and, like they did last year, knock off a Tennessee. I don't think they're going to knock off a Georgia. Honestly, at this point, I'm more concerned about the, law taking care of Georgia's dynasty than about an actual team taking care of Georgia's dynasty. Read an interesting Atlanta Journal-Courier article this morning. Anyway, I'll send that to you later. Okay. But yeah, Shane Beamer, there's a certain amount of faith I have in him, and as much as up and down as Spencer Rattler can be, I think they're going to cause some chaos.
They will. I never trust Spencer Rattler. I always thought he was one of those guys who got a little too much hype, and he really never lived up to the expectation at Oklahoma.
Which it's kind of hard. Too much hype.
Exactly. And I know it's kind of hard to say that when you got freaking Caleb Williams that you're battling it out with. But he goes to South Carolina, and they did have a nice run at the end of the season last year. But South Carolina is one of those teams to me that's always kind of lost in the shuffle, and they have these expectations that they just can never quite capture. They'll have some dogs every once once in a while, but they just never can put it together.
Who are you going with?
I'm going Ole Miss.
Okay, there we go.
To the SIP.
That's going to make the people in our chat happy. I think they both got Ole Miss.
I'm headed to the SIP because
we're talking about you, Paxton.
I'll look, Lane Kiffin, you love him, hate him. He is hilarious. He is the portal king for a reason. You look
Come to the SIP.
The SIP. I mean, dude, throw on some big crit, let's vibe, baby. So look, you got Walker Howard that you took from LSU. You brought Spencer Sanders over. Jackson Dart I think Jackson Dart will still be the guy. I think that's the expectation, is really kind of like push him, and obviously Howard's going to be the future. Your wide receiver core, you brought over Chris Marshall from Texas A&M, balled out. You brought Trey Harris, who's an all-conference USA receiver last year at La Tech. And then, of course, the one that really got a lot of attention in our neck of the woods, Zachary Franklin. Yep. You took Zachary Franklin from the Roadrunners to Jeff Traylor, which did not sit well with my man
that hurts. All. We like UTSA here.
Yeah, Roadrunners all day. I'm big. I love Jeff Traylor and the Roadrunners. But look, man, that cast right there is absolutely absurd. If Jackson Dart can't work with that, then son, get a different occupation. Like Will Howard will definitely help you out with that.
Yeah.
And then you also have the benefit of the safety net and, I don't know, Quinshad freaking Judkins at your running back. The dude's a freak. He set a program record in rushing yards last season as a freshman with over 1,500. He had 16 touchdowns as well. And then a guy that I'm really sold on, Ulysses Bentley. I think people forget about Ulysses Bentley. Dude,
SMU transfer?
He was cold at SMU. So freaking good.
I mean, how could you not be cold with a name like Ulysses Bentley the fourth?
You have to.
You got to remember the fourth.
Exactly.
Come on.
So I think their offense is going to be a lot of fun to watch. I think they're going to give a lot of defenses hell. And then when you look on the other side of the ball, you're going to have a new defensive coordinator coming over in Golding from Alabama. Him and Kiffin have worked together before when they were with the Tide. And then as far as your schedule goes, this is why I think they can cause some chaos, because you go to Bama and to Georgia. While you're probably not favored to win either one of those games, and I think everybody would probably agree Bama's more likely, you have an opportunity to stir the pot and shake the main teams up that everybody are expecting to be in it all. And you also host LSU. So I think that's just kind of given all of that. Ole Miss is going to be fun to watch. They're going to be exciting, and I think they are a really dangerous team that can cause some hell in the SEC.
Yeah, I see that, and honestly, I don't feel like there were a lot of other options. Like, I feel like those are the two options, like the one option in either division. Because I mean, like, you want to sit here and tell me Texas A&M is an actual dark horse? Like, I mean, come on, they've got talent, but I just think everything's terribly managed. I think
the chemistry is going to be a disaster there.
Yeah, so I think those are good calls for the SEC. Now in the ACC, I believe we have the same team because. Again, it just doesn't feel like there are a lot of great options. It feels like there are a lot of middling programs, and then you just expect Florida State and Clemson to be playing for that conference title at the end of the year. So who's going to possibly pop up, cause some chaos, knock one of them down, bring some things into question? Garrett?
I'm taking Duke.
I'm taking Duke too.
I think if you go back to, it might have been one of our first episodes we did of the show. We had JD Piquel, the homie from On 3 on, and we were talking about, JD's awesome. And we were talking about the teams, and I asked him about Duke because I feel like Duke is one of those teams that when you have a guy like Riley Leonard at your quarterback position, I think people don't realize how good he is. He was the third leading quarterback in that conference behind Drake May and Jordan Travis, who I think will probably be some of the higher drafted quarterbacks going out.
Definitely.
He also threw for almost 3,000 yards and 20 touchdowns. You have 9 returning starters on offense. Your receiver, Jalen Calhoun, is a freak. He's also third in the ACC in receptions as well. And you have 3 other wide receivers who are good. You have dual running backs in senior Jalen Coleman and Jordan Waters. You have 3 offensive linemen returning. And your defense recovered 16 fumbles, forced 10 interceptions, and they're only losing 3 starters.
Yeah. Like, I've seen it listed at 8 and 8, so 3 starters on either side of the ball gone. And frankly, you've got a coach who is incredibly well respected out there, Mike Elko.
Yes.
Top defensive mind. Like, I just don't know who else to pick. I don't see North Carolina as a sleeper. I already have questions about them this year.
I don't think
are they going to produce outside of
Drake May? No.
Outside of Drake May. But beyond that, it's just I can't consider them more than a surprise if they do well. Like a dark horse, I don't have confidence in them, and they're already supposed to be that like third best program in the ACC. You really want me to say that the program that's supposed to be like the third best year in, year out is a dark horse? Nah, forget about it.
Well, I also think too, like kind of going back with what I was saying.
And that's a little pedantic for me. I get it.
kind of going back to what I was saying with Ole Miss, right? If you look at Duke's schedule, you open the season at home against Clemson. So you're playing arguably the team who everybody expects. Then with Florida State.
I'm not a fan of Duke's schedule. Well, I will say that.
The reason I like it is because if they're able to pull off some upsets, they're going to shake up the whole aspect of the ACC, right?
Yes, they could shake up the entire playoff race if one of those upsets is Notre Dame. I believe Notre Dame.
Notre Dame, and then you also got Florida State on the road. So I mean, you have an opportunity to ruin the season for three teams who a lot of people have a lot of high praise on, and I think that Duke is one of those programs that those teams are going to look at and be like, "Oh, we should beat them," right? Like you got to be careful with that. So that's why I kind of like their schedule. It could be a disaster, obviously, but if they could, pull off an upset or two, then they're going to shake things up for the entire college football landscape.
Yeah. I see us agreeing on another team, though, here as we get to the last conference, the Pac-12, because I think they can also shake up the playoff race and the national conversation. It's Oregon State, right?
Yes.
It's got to be Oregon State of the Pac-12. Like, you won double-digit games last year. You're bringing in an impact transfer in DJU, who I know he hasn't, necessarily completely won the starting job yet, but you're bringing him in, you're mixing him with a returning Pac-12 freshman of the year at running back behind 4 out of 5 starting O-lines. Yeah, Damian Martinez, he is cold. And frankly, the schedule doesn't look bad. You don't play USC, and it just comes down to the end of the year, Washington, and then at Oregon.
Yep.
And one of those is a rivalry game where anything can happen. So, I am really liking what Oregon State could do in the playoff race, especially if they pop off, have a good year, make it to the Pac-12 title game, and then play USC. Mm-hmm. I think it's great for them because they don't have to play them earlier in the year.
Right.
It helps them to get to that title game where they could then cause problems for the playoff race.
No, I agree. And I think people should, if some people have concerns about DJU, rightfully so, I would agree with that. But my thing is I'm looking, and this is just me. So I'm looking at DJU in the same light that I looked at Bo Nix. Bo Nix was okay at Auburn, cool, you're all right. And I think DJU, there was flashes of greatness, right? But for the most part, there was a lot of just not living up to expectations. And I think when you have the fan base wanting Cade Klubnik, which why wouldn't you want Cade Klubnik? Yeah. I think that plays into it. But I can see DJU going out there, kind of like Bo Nix did, and just having a resurgence of himself and making himself put together a career that can boost his draft potential. And I hope he does. I don't wish ill on anybody. And I know a lot of people, quarterbacks, we see it here in Waco all the time, right? Quarterbacks catch hell from fan bases for just unwarranted reasons. So I'm not going to put that on DJU. I want him to be successful. And he also has 4 of the 5 returning offensive linemen to block for him. The tight end room is loaded. You brought in the transfer from Cal, and you got a lot of help on your defense as well. So I think the Beavers are going to be hell, and they're a team that you need to watch, and I think that they're a great dark horse for that conference.
Yeah, LFG in the chat actually threw out a good one for the ACC I hadn't thought of just in terms of raising some hell in the conference. Don't expect much out of him this year, but Braum at Louisville. He did good stuff at Purdue.
He did.
And they might up and surprise someone and still not make a bowl.
Well, see, I think Louisville and Braum are – if this was next year, I would definitely take them.
Yes,
I
exactly.
feel like they're a year ahead.
We're on the same page.
But I would that is definitely one to keep an eye on.
So, LFG in the chat, that was a good shout. Garrett, anything else in this segment? Any other teams you feel like we might have passed over too quickly?
No, I think you could make an argument maybe for Arizona. I know they have a really good quarterback coming back, but this just as a whole, their football program is just not there yet. I'm really intrigued by Arizona State, but I think Arizona State is kind of like Louisville. I think they're probably about a year or 2 out.
A year away from being a dark horse, 2 years away from possibly being a contender if the dark horse year goes well.
So those are a couple teams. Colorado, I think, is just going to be a disaster. But we will see.
That's going to be fun.
We have limited time here, so we're going to come back and kind of go through our skill players that we're looking at for the all Big 12 preseason team, and that's coming up next here on the College Chaos Podcast. Welcome back into the College Chaos Podcast. Garrett, Ross, Jack Mackenzie here with you. Emery Winter holding it down over there in the corner. And we're going to take a look at some of the all Big 12 conference team
because
playmakers.
We didn't have time to send these in to the Big 12 when they asked for them.
Well, I was on vacation, and you did bring
and
up
you were on vacation.
You did bring up a good point that I had time. I could have. I just,
Yeah, you were on vacation. You
on
want to enjoy your vacation. And then my reason is you were on vacation. I had a lot of to do.
Exactly. So we kind of went over this morning, and, it's debatable. It's fun. These things are, they get a lot of attention, and rightfully so. And I want to start with the quarterback position because this is one that I've gone back and forth on numerous times, and it's really been between Quinn Ewers and Will Howard. We heard.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I've got Jalen Daniels coming up for my number one.
I love Jalen Daniels. I think he's the most exciting player.
Those are the
in
top
league.
three, though. I think hands down.
Dude, well,
my
yes,
guy.
hands down. But I think if Dylan Gabriel could get his crap together.
He's not going to.
And John Rice Plumlee.
I put money on he's not going to.
John Rice Plumlee is one I'm interested in seeing in this league.
I don't think the talent around him is good enough.
Maybe so. And that's what we're going to find out with that learning curve. But no, I went with Quinn.
Look, Garrett, my job is to sit here and have takes, not waver from them until I'm proven terribly wrong, and then barely apologize if I apologize at all.
Look, man, that's the American way, right?
That was sarcasm for all you folks out there. I hope you got that. Anyway.
So I went with Quinn ultimately because I feel like, look, while
how do you go? He's my third.
Because he has, all right, look. If
Man's got to stay healthy.
I know, and he hasn't since his junior year in high school. But, this is it, right? Like, this is the year. Like, if you can't do it this year, son, you better find something else to do because you're not going to do it in the SEC. I'm sorry. It's not happening.
I thought you were talking about the NFL.
That either. I don't know, dude.
Because that's the thing. If he's good this year, he's going to the NFL, right?
He should be. And
if he's not good this year, then, Arch is going to be competing. Malik Murphy. I was blanking on his last name. Yeah. But yes, both of those guys are going to be pushing him for next year in the SEC when the stakes get that much higher. So he's got to put it together this year. I hate doing this. I hate being this guy that's you got to show me first. But
no, at this point it is. It's
but shoot, everyone knows the talent's there. He actually has to go do it consistently, not just go do it once or twice. He has to go do it consistently, and stay healthy.
And we've seen this at Texas before, right? I think if you go back and look at Garrett Gilbert, there was so much expectations on him, and he never lived up to it. And I'm not saying Quinn is that, but I'm saying you're walking a fine line with repeating history. So I feel like this is a make or break season for him. And the core around him, dude, is just stupid. If you can't do it with that talent, then you just can't do it, period.
Yeah, honestly, I agree with that. I just also feel like maybe the talent around him puts guys like Howard or Daniels with less talent around them who could put up similar numbers and lead their team to similar success, could actually put put them above Ewers in this conversation. So that's why I have Jalen Daniels number 1. Weakest roster out of the 3 QBs we're discussing here: KU, KSU, and Texas. And he arguably was the most consistent and most electric in his time while healthy.
Right.
Health is a concern there. I can't hold that against Ewers and not hold that against Daniels. He's got that it, and I'm excited to see it. So I'm going out on a limb there and saying him, because the safe pick is Will Howard. Yeah, the safe pick is the guy with like the full returning starting O-line, like plenty of all-conference O-linemen in front of him, and he just has to have weapons who are on time and open enough, because he's going to be accurate. He's going to get it done, and he's got some legs underneath him too. So like I think that's the conversation at QB, really, is those 3.
It really is. It
could be a dark horse come up, but
could be, but we'll see. And then so you get 2 running backs that you get to choose on this list, and I went with one guy who really made an impression last year and a newcomer. So let's start with Richard Reese. I think Richard Reese is a phenomenal running back. I had an opportunity to cover him when he was at Belleville in high school. Great personality, great work ethic, just an all-around dude he's great for the locker room, and then he produces on the field.
I think the only question I have about Richard Reese is, how is Baylor going to manage the carries in that running back room? Because that room has more talent in it now than it did last year. And that might be a little unfair to Tay McWilliams, who had a devastating injury and did not come back last year.
That was a different. He had one. That was a totally different scenario.
Point being is that they were banged up last year, and Reese was able to benefit in terms of getting a large number of carries as a freshman, which was impressive that he produced that. But if Dominic Richardson, the Oklahoma State transfer, and Bryson Washington, a very talented, legit looking freshman, like if those guys take carries off of him, then hopefully he could hit the same numbers on fewer carries, but he might not grow the numbers, like raw numbers, as much.
No, and I think that will benefit him, though. I think that when you take the reps and the hits away from him, you're going to see more breakaway plays. And it's not just – he doesn't just do it in the running game. He does it – he can catch out of the backfield, the blocking. I mean, he's just a solid all-around.
And as big of a question mark as the defense is for Baylor.
Exactly.
Like, how much worse could they be?
The clock.
But that's the thing, is they're going to focus on the run early, and then hopefully the defense will be better where they won't be chasing games late, and they can just keep pounding the rock.
Yeah, but the newcomer I'm going with is Treshaun Ward. I think I'm really excited to watch him in the Big 12. You go back and look at what he did at Florida State last year. He had 628 yards on the ground. He had 7 touchdowns, and he looked really good against Oklahoma in the bowl game. I think you put him behind that offensive line, and we saw the success that Deuce had last year. And I think Jeff Burkhart was right earlier about pump the brakes. I'm not expecting to see him put up Deuce Vaughn numbers, but I'm seeing him have a breakout season and be arguably, like I said, one of the best running backs in the conference.
Yeah. I see plenty of potential there. I definitely, like, there are some potential shouts out there, like Ward, where you don't know how it's going to fit replacing Vaughn.
Right.
Or there are guys like Cedric Baxter in a really talented team down in Austin. And there are other guys in that room that could take stats and carries away from him. But there are more proven guys out there, like Devin Neal at Kansas.
Good. Yeah.
Like, you expect that offense to have to carry that team. And maybe I just sound like really high on Kansas's offensive talent right now.
But rightfully so. Look what they did last year.
But they produced last year, and that's what I'm saying.
But, I mean, you got to back it up. And I understand people, year to year, defenses can scheme. You have the tape and everything. But I think the fact that Kansas is being thrown out there is beautiful, and it's great for the conference as a whole, honestly.
Yeah.
It really is.
My only other shout would maybe be the Alabama transfer at TCU, Trey Sanders.
Yes.
Just because they're gonna be putting up numbers on offense. I just know they're going to be putting up numbers on offense. I don't know if it's going to be more through the air, more through the ground.
Well, that offense is predicated on the run game.
Predicated on the run game. It's the Browse offense.
Yes.
But we'll see just where they're at and just how much that they can do.
Yep. You get 3 receivers on this, and
I'm just going to be peppering names in here because you've got the big names. You know more about the receivers, but I'm going to pepper in some guys that are going to make you think.
Okay, so my 3 receivers, I got Xavier Worthy at Texas. Just an absolute freak show. I know he took a step back last year. That room as a whole is really loaded with Neor and A.D. Mitchell, and I think you could really kind of throw any of them in the mix. But Xavier Worthy is the one who was proven in that offense, while A.D. Mitchell did show out at Georgia. So I'm riding with him.
He can get open.
Yeah,
he can get open
760 yards
times
last year, 9 touchdowns.
And I just need to make sure he's consistent catching the ball.
Yeah, that was part on Quinn.
Dude, that's the weird thing about him. He's
got
got all the talent.
Weird.
He's got all the talent, But this man, like, the number one receiver in the conference is one that you're like, he's just got to make sure he catches the ball. That's a little weird to me. It's a little weird to me.
So another guy I'm going with, let's go with one who was in the league last year, Jalil Farouk at Oklahoma. I think this is a guy who you have another year in the system, and talk about what TCU and what they do, it's almost identical up there. I think if you can get that offense going, he had a really good bowl game against Florida State. He had 5 touchdowns last year. I expect him to be the man this year for the Sooners, and I could see him really kind of balling out and being a guy that a lot of DBs are worried about facing when they line up against Oklahoma.
Yeah, I see that and I hear that. I think it'll be interesting to see play out. Who's your third before I start kind of peppering mine in?
So my third is a new guy. It's Jaden Higgins at Iowa State. I think that when you lose a guy like Hutchinson, you're going to need a number one receiver to step up. This is a guy who balled out last year at Eastern Kentucky. He had 757 yards, 10 touchdowns. You put him with Hunter Deckers, who I think is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the conference. I think that could be a combo that really gives people fits. Now, what is Iowa State going to look like with the player situation from the gambling? That could be a factor.
Yeah.
But just as far as like a playmaker, I like Jaden Higgins a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that. He was not really on my radar, I got to say, because I was looking more at guys like, and this might be an easy answer, Jordan Whittington down in Texas.
Absolutely.
I mean, all these other guys, I have concerns about, like, is Worthy going to catch the ball? A.D. Mitchell and Nayor, like Nayor coming back from injury, A.D. Mitchell, and, like, he transferred for a reason. There are concerns I have about playing time and how they mesh. Jordan Whittington, I have no concern. That man is just going to go out there.
Health. That's my only concern with Whittington.
Okay, yes, that's fair. But when he's healthy, he's going to go out there.
Absolutely.
He's going to get open. Quinn's going to find him, and he's going to catch the ball, and he's going to run hard. Whittington there are so many flashy guys at Texas where I'm like, okay, cool, yeah. You got all this talent, whatever. Like, just win finally.
Exactly.
Jordan Whittington is the kind of guy who takes you to wins. He's the kind of dirty worker with talent that you're just like, oh man, I hate going up against this guy. Got to respect him. Yeah. So I think he's a great pick for making an all Big 12 team. JP Richardson at TCU, the Oklahoma State transfer.
That's one I wasn't thinking about. And him in that offense at TCU could be extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
So what do you?
Oh, you were teaming me up there? I thought you were about to go. Okay, so the Barles offense, they're going to hit you hard, power run game, and then throw it over the top. JP Richardson out of the slot. He's got talent around him at TCU to allow him to just pick apart teams across the middle. Chandler Morse, he picked apart Baylor across the middle. He won the starting job over Duggan in the fall last year. Mm-hmm. Like, there's so many reasons, and if you watch the spring game, Richardson, if Richardson was not the guy that popped to you in the spring game, I don't know what game you were watching for TCU, because it just seemed like he is going to be that back-breaking guy for the offense. He is going to get open in the worst way for the defense, and he's going to take it to the house probably. So I really like what they could do with him. My only other shout, we don't have to spend any time on it, is because it's a run-heavy scheme, quarterback questions, Keatron Jackson. He's a talent. It doesn't feel like Baylor's had. So, yeah, we have to see it, but put him on the radar. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. Just the radar.
I think another guy just to throw on the radar, too, is Savion Red at TCU. I think that he is going to be electric. I think with losing Quentin Johnson, he's almost like a carbon copy. And to see what he can do in that offense is going to be intriguing. But the last thing we'll put a bow on it with this is the tight end position. And I think that you could make an argument for any of the tight ends in Baylor's room with Drake Dabney coming back, Kelsey Johnson. I really like what they have there. But if you're talking pound-for-pound playmaker, I got to go Jatavian Sanders at Texas. I mean, the dude's an absolute freak. He's like 6'5", just massive, hard to tackle, great soft hands, 54 receptions last year, 613 yards, 5 touchdowns. He is an absolute mismatch nightmare inside the red zone, and I expect him to have a breakout year.
Yeah. I got nothing else, man. We've been going. We went over about 10 minutes. Someone's telling me that I am full malarkey for saying that Tech can't be a dark horse. I mean, come on.
Tech is not a dark horse.
They're not
Tech
dark. They're
so
in the limelight.
Exactly, and they're more so in the national limelight now that they're probably going to land Micah Hudson. So there's nothing dark horse about Texas Tech.
Yeah,
I
can say they're in the limelight and say I don't think they're going to win more than 7 games. I don't care what you say, the Big Lubbock. Honestly,
hey, it's just an opinion.
It's just an opinion. I don't have to have yours.
So, yeah,
anyway,
that's a good point. But so that's going to do it for today. We appreciate you listening, whether it's live or whether you go back and watch on YouTube. Make sure and go like and subscribe the Crystal Ball College Football channel, as well as the Baylor Bears on Sick'em365.com and all the other stuff we have.
Yeah, it's been a long day. Please just check out our channels. And if you don't like my opinion, I'm sure you'll like someone else's on here. We've got plenty of guys who are pumping up tech.
Yep.
And other programs.
No, but until next time, and we will not have one programming note. We will not do a show next week. Jack is going on vacation.
Much needed vacation.
We will be back live from Big 12 Media Days in Arlington as we do the show. We're also trying to work on a special roundtable with everybody who is on this channel. So it'll be Jack and I, as well as Grayson and Josh Neighbors coming to you live from Jerry World. So that's when we'll be back. But we appreciate you listening. Make sure you like and subscribe. This has been the College Chaos Podcast.